Today, we're going to explore the origins of mental health diagnosis, a topic that traces back much further than you might think. When we talk about mental health today, we often think of modern classifications: depression, anxiety, schizophrenia. But have you ever wondered where it all started? How did ancient cultures perceive mental illness? What was the first mental condition ever described and treated medically? Well, for that, we need to travel back over 2,000 years to ancient Greece. The first mental condition we know of, one that was systematically described and studied, is melancholia, which today we recognize as a form of severe depression. Now, you've probably heard of Hippocrates, often referred to as the father of medicine. He was the first to conceptualize melancholia as something not born of divine punishment or demonic possession, which were common explanations at the time, but as a medical condition rooted in the body's internal workings. According to Hippocrates, the human body was governed by four humors: blood, phlegm, yellow bile, and black bile. He believed that health depended on the balance of these four fluids, and illness, whether physical or mental, was caused by an imbalance. Melancholia, in his view, was the result of an excess of black bile. This might sound strange to us now, but it was revolutionary for its time because it framed mental illness as something that could be understood, diagnosed, and treated within the natural world, rather than something mystical or spiritual. Hippocrates' description of melancholia included many symptoms we still recognize today in modern psychiatry. He wrote about patients who exhibited deep sadness, an overwhelming sense of fear, loss of appetite, insomnia, and lethargy, what we'd call classic depressive symptoms. But what's even more interesting is the way he prescribed treatment. He recommended lifestyle changes, particularly rest, healthy diet, and exercise, methods that are still advised for those suffering from depression today. It's fascinating to think that over 2 millennia ago, these very basic but essential interventions were already being employed. Now, what's important to recognize is that melancholia wasn't just a fleeting idea. It persisted for centuries. In fact, melancholia dominated early understandings of mental illness well into the Renaissance and even beyond. Physicians, philosophers, and writers like Galen, Avicenna, and even Robert Burton, in his monumental 1621 work, The Anatomy of Melancholy, further expanded on this idea. The theory of humors may have been replaced by more modern biological and psychological explanations, but the concept of melancholia as a distinct mental condition, rooted in sadness, despair, and fear, has remained part of our cultural and medical language for centuries. But why is melancholia significant? Why is it so important that this condition was the first to be identified and studied systematically? Well, melancholia set the stage for understanding that the human mind can experience deep dysfunction, just like the body. It marked the beginning of an attempt to frame mental illness as something treatable, rather than punishable or shamed. Imagine living in ancient times. If you exhibited behaviors we now associate with depression, you might have been seen as cursed or possessed. You could have been ostracized or even punished. Hippocrates and his followers helped pave the way for an entirely different way of thinking. They laid the groundwork for a medical model that would, centuries later, evolve into psychiatry and psychology as we know them today. That shift, from viewing mental illness as a supernatural phenomenon to seeing it as a medical condition, was monumental. It was the beginning of recognizing that mental health deserves as much attention, care, and understanding as physical health. Today, we understand depression through a combination of neurological, genetic, and psychological factors, but in many ways, we're still building on the legacy of those early thinkers. Although the black bile theory may seem primitive now, the fact that people like Hippocrates tried to make sense of mental suffering through observation and treatment, and not fear or superstition, is what makes melancholia such a landmark in the history of mental health. So, the next time you think about mental health, remember this: we stand on the shoulders of ancient giants. Melancholia was the first condition that bridged the gap between mind and medicine. It's a testament to how far we've come in understanding the complexities of the human brain and how much further we still have to go.